Okay, so you want that to be, so you consider that to be about 7.5 otherwise. And then for folks with a graduate degree or an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree, you could probably cut it in half again. And for folks with a graduate degree, you could cut it in half again, right? And so there is a very practical piece to your employability, maybe in general or maybe specific to the field you want to be in. And these folks will talk to you a little bit about that. Before they talk to you, and this is the most talking I'll do besides asking questions of these folks, Lacey Cerf is here, who is going to talk to you a little bit about graduate school in terms, conceptually, in terms of what does it mean, how's it different from your undergraduate experience, and her experience in working with students who are considering graduate school. So I'm going to let Lacey come up, say a couple of words to you, and then we'll get to our panel here, okay? Everybody cool with that? All right.
Good evening, everyone. Haven't talked to in a mic in a while, so bear with me. So as Dr. Parkinson said, I'm Lacey Cerf, and I'm the Director of Graduate Admissions here at Coker. I have worked in college admissions for the last 6 years, five of those years directly in graduate programming. So before the panel begins, I wanted to share some information from the viewpoint of a college enrollment counselor in regards to what we look for in candidates and answer the most common questions that I receive from students considering graduate school. The first question I often hear is, what is grad school? Compared to undergraduate studies, graduate school is a more concentrated course of study in a specific discipline. Graduate programs typically entail rigorous evaluation of your work by professors and peers. It also is more focused studies in a specific discipline with fewer elective possibilities. It often involves work experience via internships, teaching, or research as well. It also requires production of original research, which is a very common requirement. Master's degrees are offered in many fields of study. Some are designed to prepare you for pursuing a doctoral degree, while others are the terminal degree for a profession. Terminal degree meaning they are the highest degree needed in certain disciplines, such as a Master of Library Science or a Master of Fine Arts. The next common question I often hear is, what is the difference between graduate programs and professional programs? Both graduate and professional schools offer students who have already earned a bachelor's degree the opportunity to study advanced curriculum. But the major difference between the two is where the focus lies. Professional school programs help prepare students for careers in specific fields. These are often specialized advanced degrees in professional fields such as medicine, pharmacy, nursing, engineering, or law. They typically have more practicum or practical experience involved in the curriculum. Graduate school programs are academic programs that offer more advanced courses of study in certain disciplines. This can mean earning a master's degree on its own or a step towards earning a PhD program. The most common question for applicants, of course, is what are general grad school admission requirements? The first requirement is to have always obtained a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. The GPA varies depending on the program that you're applying to, so it's very important to research your program to know the exact GPA requirements. A 3.0 is typically standard for most institutions, but that can vary depending on the program that you're looking to enroll. Other requirements are based upon the school and the program you're applying for. The most common are letters of recommendation, which 2 to 4 letters are standard. Prior to applying to grad school, you should prepare by identifying 2 to 4 individuals that will support your application and provide references on your behalf. A personal statement or statement of purpose is another common admission document that is required for most graduate programs. This is one of the most important parts of your admissions portfolio. It's the opportunity to show the graduate committee who you truly are and explain why the program is a great fit for you and why you would excel in that program. These statements are generally 1 to 3 double-spaced pages. The personal statement typically focuses on who you are as a person, whereas the statement of interest or statement of purpose centers more on your academic background and your professional goals as well. Resumes and curriculum vitae, or CVs, are always required, and resumes are typically a single-paged, focused predominantly on your employment, whereas CVs concentrate more on your academic history and fieldwork experiences. If you're given the choice between the two, definitely go for a CV. Many schools also require standardized test scores. Most common are the GRE that you might be familiar with. This is the graduate record exam. This is the general test for graduate admission to graduate school. The GRE costs approximately $200. The GMAT is the graduate management admissions test, and this is the second most common and very common for business programs. The LSAT, if you're looking to go into law school, is the law school admission test, and the MCAT is the medical college admission test if you're going into the medical field. And finally, often in-person or virtual interviews are very common as well when applying for many graduate school programs, so be prepared for either a virtual or an on-campus interview as well. And the last question is, what do committees look for in candidates? Grad schools often prefer applicants who have a passion for the field in which they're applying and interests that align with what the program offers. Grad schools don't just want students to never use their degrees. They want students with clearly defined academic and personal goals, meaning students that know what they want to study, the type of research they want to do, and how those experiences will help them in their future endeavors. Grad schools also want applicants who are likely to become successful in their chosen fields, partly because student success can grow the reputation of the graduate program as well. In addition to a passion for your field, grad schools also want to see that you have a proven track record of academic success. Essentially, past academic achievements are what proves to the graduate school that you're capable of doing well in graduate level work. Relevant experience is also a good indicator to review committees as well, that you have a background and basic foundation in the area that you're choosing to study and advance in. Graduate programs usually are far more challenging than undergraduate courses. That is something to keep in mind. So being prepared for the commitment and the work that's needed, that you need to put into your graduate program is imperative before enrolling so you are successful. And my final word of advice to anyone considering graduate school is to do your research and to definitely prepare early. Research the requirements for the specific program and institution you're applying for, so you have ample time to prep for graduate school admission tests if they are required for your program, and also to prepare your materials. Many programs have firm deadlines and offer admission only once per year, so it is important to know the deadlines so you don't miss applying for the term or the year in which you plan to enroll.
Okay, so now we get to spend a little bit of time hearing from folks who have, in one way or another, taken a graduate school path. I, for example, took what folks would call a very traditional path, which was I was in my undergraduate program, and the following year, immediately thereafter, I was in a graduate program. The only thing non-traditional was I went to live in Paris during the months in between, which I suppose not everybody does. But otherwise, I took a traditional path, whereas my wife, for example, worked for about 6 years and then decided she wanted to go back to graduate school, which she did while employed full-time, whereas I spent full-time on a campus going to graduate school. These folks will have that range of stories, and so we're going to get right to them, and I'm going to let each one, starting with soon-to-be Dr. Drain here, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, tell you what graduate program they completed or are in the process of completing. And this is the one question, panel, for which we will expect everyone to give an answer. After that, it's not necessary for everyone to give an answer. Just feel free to chime in as you hear a question, especially if your answer is somehow different than what folks have already heard. And guys, don't feel like you have to wait until the end of my going through these questions for you to ask yours. If you hear something that raises your curiosity, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll stop and hear you, because it's really about the opportunity for you to learn from the folks who are taking some time to be here tonight. So, Ms. Drain.
All right. Hey, guys. My name is Mackenzie Drain. I'm the assistant softball coach at Coker. I have an undergrad degree in interdisciplinary studies with a minor in elementary education. Once I graduated, I actually went right into a master's of education program specializing in special education. About halfway through that program, I had the opportunity to come to Coker College and pursue a Master of Science in College Athletic Administration. I decided that that was a path that I would rather pursue, so I came here. I graduated with that degree in 2015. In November 16, I started pursuing a degree in a doctorate of education specializing in athletic management.
And my name is Sarah Floyd. I just graduated in May from Coker, and I am a first semester master's student at the University of South Carolina in vocal performance, and I actually just hopefully will be adding a Master's of Arts in Teaching so I can teach in the school systems as well. So, yeah.
Good evening. That's one way to introduce myself. I know, right? I'm Dr. Danny Malone. I did all of my degrees at Texas A&M University in College Station. How did I get to grad school? Well, I'll let you know first off. I always tell my students in my capstone course, I was originally an electrical engineering major when I started college. Didn't work out after 2 years. I got into sociology, loved it. I got the opportunity to do an undergraduate research program in the summer of 2009, which was right before my senior year. That convinced me that, hey, I really want to do this. And so applied to grad school, got into A&M, and I figured stay where I had kind of started getting my roots in. And so got the master's in 2013, and then I walked last May, so May 2017, with my PhD. So I was already here at Coker, finishing up my PhD, and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm starting to feel a little bit old as we're going down the line here. My name is Danny Johnson. I graduated from Coker back in '04, and I got my undergrad here in business and history. And then my master's degree is from Clemson University in engineering. So I'm all across the board. I'm not real good at any of it, but I can definitely give you some good advice. I waited 10 years in between my undergrad to grad. I don't recommend that. It's way, way too long to wait, and you forget a lot of things, and it made it very difficult on myself. So I would encourage all of you to go the traditional route and go straight in as quick as possible and get your graduate degree as soon as you can. Don't wait, because it only took me 3 years to get 2 years worth, so just to give you an idea. So anyway.
Thank you, Danny. I'm Andy Burkemper. I went to a school called Drury University, which is very similar to Coker for my undergraduate degree, a bachelor's in business administration with a management concentration. That took me to Kansas City for my first job at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, and I decided to take 1 year off and then get right back into it because I felt like if I waited much longer, I might not do it. And waiting that year allowed me to take advantage of their tuition reimbursement. A lot of major corporations and even mid-level companies have deals where if you make the grades, they will pay you back for your tuition. So I believe my MBA, which was the degree I pursued at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, was about 13 courses, and each course was about $1,000. So that was 13 grand that I did not have to pay anything once I was able to be reimbursed for all those courses, all A's and B's. So that's why I got reimbursed, Danny. And so that, I would encourage you to look into those options. If you're not quite sure if you want to immediately launch into a graduate program, think about finding an employer like Sunoco that likely has a tuition reimbursement program. At the time, about 10 years ago, the cap was $5,200 per year that the Fed was able to chip in towards that. So that worked out well. Then I had to quit my job full-time and go back to school full-time for my PhD in entrepreneurship and innovation. I was able to do that at the same institution since I had a history of taking classes there, and that worked out well for me to apply and got into that program full-time. I applied to 3 PhD programs. I did not get into 2 of them, and I got into 1, and that's a pretty common experience whenever you get to that PhD level. It's very competitive, so you need to get a lot of help and make sure you know what to submit for that.
Thank you. I'm Sabrina Dixon Ridges, and I have an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering, Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of South Carolina in Columbia. And I interned every summer while I was going to school. And when I graduated, I started working at the same company called Chem Nuclear. And shortly after that, I got an offer to come work at Sunoco. And before I graduated from the University of South Carolina, our professor started talking to us about applying to graduate school, and I thought that might be something I might like to do. I really had not thought about it prior to that last semester. So I went through that process of applying to 3 graduate schools, and And I really had not made up my mind, so I said, I'm gonna go on and work, because that was really what I always thought I was gonna do when I graduated. And I just had it in my back pocket that I had been accepted to those other the graduate schools. And so once I left Chem Nuclear, I started working for Sunoco, and I really enjoyed the culture. Probably didn't enjoy my job as much as I thought I was going to enjoy it. And it was a little bit of a transition going from the schedule of college life to the schedule of working from 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock and traveling to places, by yourself. And so I decided that I did want to go on to graduate school, and I had this limitation. The acceptance was only going to be valid for a year. So I knew that within a year I needed to make up my mind. And so close to the end of that year of working, I did decide to go to graduate school. So I have a Master's of Science in Chemical Engineering from the North Carolina State University, and really enjoyed that. It is a very family-oriented graduate program, and everyone, I'm pretty sure almost everyone in the chemical engineering or in the engineering department worked as research fellows. So your education was paid by the fact that you were going to do research all day long and create reports and publications and turn that in, and the school was going to get credit for what you learned. But it was a good trade-off, so that was the way I funded my graduate school education.
That's a wonderful perspective, Sabrina. Wow. In fact, NC State doesn't take people unless they're really great students. I'm joking, but I'm from North Carolina, and I went to NC State for undergraduate. And like many of you, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I liked science. And I ended up getting a job in a lab as a dishwasher, washing beakers and graduated cylinders. And in a few months, they had trusted me with some other responsibilities. And I ended up staying and doing a master's degree in that laboratory. So right away, I knew what the impact was of someone who trusted you, and in gaining that trust, I opened the door for a mentor to kind of enter the situation. So if a lot of you may not know the difference between an advisor and a mentor, and that's okay, that's most people. But in reality, I hadn't had a mentor until that time, and the mentor is what kind of directed me on my path. And I had since went to Purdue University for a PhD, and maybe even more relevant to this discussion, and I don't know if many people, maybe Tracy knows, but one of the reasons I was hired at Coker, and one reason I took the job about a dozen years ago, was to increase the number of students who proceed to graduate school in the sciences. And so with my research program and trying to foster that activity across all disciplines over the last several years, the students that I've mentored specifically, which might exceed the number of students in this forum, have so far earned 24 graduate degrees at schools like USC, Clemson, MUSC, North Carolina State, Purdue, University of Arkansas, Ohio State, Indiana University in Bloomington, Southern Illinois University, and about a third are doctoral students. And I have a few recent graduates that are currently in the system. One I saw Friday, Kendra Lambert, who played basketball here, graduated in May, and she's going to finish in May of this next year with a master's degree, and she already has been visited. She's at Indiana University right now, and she's just overjoyed with the program, and I couldn't be happier for her. But I think I would like to say that I played a small role in those students' lives, very much how my mentors over the years played a role in my life, because without that relationship, it's very difficult to try to find a path that works for you. So I'll shut up and give the microphone back to Dr. Parkinson.
I got one of my own.
Oh,
Pretty good.
great. Got
Yep.
all right. Excellent.
And I'm going to ask a question that's not on my script. So, Ms. Lynn, I'm already off script. Thank you. I'm curious, how many of you folks, like me, were the first person in your family to go to graduate school? I was also the first person in my family to graduate from undergraduate. You too? Maybe. Yep. One or two of you tell us a little bit about what that conversation was like. I remember having that conversation with my dad about I wanted to go to school some more. He's very, very proud now, but we had to have a conversation about that and why I thought that was the right move for me. Anybody want to take that?
I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I just spoke, so I don't know.
Okay, and all right, we'll let Joe go and then Mackenzie.
Okay.
That'll give us two perspectives.
Well, trust me, my parents didn't go to college, and my mom was a nurse and my dad was an electrician, and they both gave me lifelong skills. I was always very proud of them, but the reality is they couldn't be more disconnected from the college life. But also, when I told them I was going to grad school, they thought I was nuts. In fact, when I told them what, and in the sciences, we're fortunate enough to have support available. So I was making money as a graduate student, and it comped out my tuition and stuff. So I was coming out ahead, but they thought I was still crazy because I was working on a corn fungus, and I wasn't working for a company, and I didn't have a job like they thought I would have. And I had to explain to them, and even explaining to my, it's kind of similar, my 8-year-old, or my 10 and 12-year-old are very similar to my parents when you're talking to them about graduate school, but the reality is they don't understand why you would want to be in college for 10 years, and that's what it ended up being, because I did 2 years for master's, 4 years for PhD, 4 years for bachelor's degree, so that's 10 years. So that's a long time, and it's an intimidating amount of time, and unfortunately, it causes a lot of bright students like yourself to think of another option. And I'm here to tell you that your life is very expansive beyond what you think it is right now. It's very concentrated right now, this time in your life. But the reality is a lot of people will go back to school. Sometimes a company pays for you to support you to go back to graduate school. When I was in graduate school, I was in graduate school with very traditional age students all the way up to 45-year-olds that were coming back to get their degrees. And trust me, there's no better time in your life than to go right now. You could go serve your country if you want to do that. Go serve in the military. I'll support you to do that. But now's the time to do graduate school. If you do it later, great, but you're going to have things that come up in your life later, like you may grow roots in your geography or, things happen. But now's a good time to really think about that, and don't be intimidated about what your parents might say. And my parents got over it. Okay, it took years, but they finally got around it, but it was worth it. And now I think they do have a much better understanding. But you have to kind of cut your folks some slack, especially if they didn't experience what you're experiencing.
Well, I have to start off by saying that I'm very fortunate to have the parents that I have, and them being so supportive of the choices that I've made as far as school and travel and everything that I've done. I remember I went into undergrad as a biochem major, and I remember I changed my major my junior year of college to elementary education, so that was on the complete opposite end of what I was doing, because my initial plan was to be a biochem major and then go off to med school. So my parents were super excited about that. I was going to be, a medical doctor, and they're like, all right, you can support us for the rest of your life. So they were hype about it. And then I told them, I think I want to be a teacher now. And they're like, awesome. So you'll be living with us forever. No, but they were excited about it. And when I graduated and I decided I wanted to go on and pursue a master's degree in special education, they were excited about that also, because the university that I decided to go to, I got a job at the university, so they were going to pay for my education, so they were super on board about that. And then I called them and I said, I don't think I'm going to do that anymore. I'm going to move to South Carolina, and I'm going to coach, and I'm going to get a degree in athletic administration. So they're thinking, okay, you're going to go coach. Okay, so you were going to be a doctor, and then you're going to be a teacher, and now you're going to be a coach. So this, they're really, excited about the finances that were coming in now. But nonetheless, they were supportive. They said, if this is what you want to do, go do it. So I moved to South Carolina, got the degree, and then I ended up moving to Cleveland, Ohio, and that November, I remember calling my dad and said, so I just did something. And he said, uh-oh, what did you do? And I said, I signed up to go back to school. And he said, again? Are you sure? And neither one of my parents have a college degree, and so me going to college was a big deal. Me getting a master's was a bigger deal, and now I'm telling them, hey, I want to get a doctorate degree, and I'm not sure how long this is going to be because I said, they give me 7 years to complete it. My dad said, are you sure? You want to go back to school? You don't want to take more time off? All you do is work and write. Are you sure this is what you want to do? And I said, I'm sure. And he said, well, whatever you want to do, you know, we're behind you 110%. And they don't necessarily understand what I'm doing going through this doctorate program. You know, I'll call them, Dad will be like, how's school going? What are you doing? And usually my response is, oh, I'm writing, and I'm in the dissertation process right now. And they definitely don't understand that, and they try to explain it to their friends what I'm doing, and my dad will call me and he'll say, are you writing a book yet? Like, you know, when is your stuff going to get published? Because, you know, if you start writing, like, maybe I'll read it or something, you know. But nonetheless, they're super supportive, and I'm thankful to have parents like that. But it's difficult trying to explain to them every single time I have a phone call with them exactly where I'm at in the program and the purpose of my research or anything that I'm actually doing in this program, what it actually means and what I can do with it. But they're supportive, and that's all I can ask for.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, a really pair of questions, but I'm going to roll them together, is to ask you what you did as an undergraduate to prepare for graduate school, and what courses or experiences were most valuable to you. And I think if you're like me, there are probably a few things you could say you did on purpose, and then there are a few things you can say, looking back, I realized this was a really good thing that I ended up doing that made me better prepared for graduate school. So same thing, not everybody has to answer, but if there are 3 or 4 folks who want to talk about, well, here's what I did to prepare, whether consciously or accidentally, here's how I got myself ready.
All right, I'll take a shot at it. So for me, back in undergrad, to prepare me for graduate school, the first thing that I think of is I always worked. In high school, I worked. I was on a swim team, football team. I did everything. So when I got to college, that didn't stop. I didn't play sports or anything, but I worked and I went to school. I probably worked too much as a freshman and sophomore, so it was probably part and parcel to why engineering may not have worked out. But once I got to sociology, I still kept working, but I was more conscious of a work-balance life. And I think that was one of the keys, time management. If you haven't mastered time management now, you're going to definitely need to when you get to grad school. So that was one of the things that I was very conscious about, work-life balance. Another thing would be contact your professors. I bet if you go back and ask all my undergraduate professors about Danny, well, he was always in my office. Making light conversations, but also talking about things academically. If graduate school is where you want to be, you probably want to speak to the people who have already done it. They have tricks that work, they have some things that don't work, but also they get to kind of see who you are. Because one of the things you will want is a letter of recommendation, which as faculty members we write for students. You want us to represent you in the best way that we can. So show us who you are. It's one thing to talk about you on paper, that you do great on exams and things of that nature, but who are you as a person? Because when you go to graduate school, they're taking on you as a person, not just as a student. So be conscious about that. Talk to faculty, but also be conscious of work-life balance. And the last thing was developing healthy social relationships. I think that's very key. So keeping friendships intact, but also being able to expand those friendship circles, because when you get to grad school, it can be lonely sometimes. I will go ahead and tell you, it can be a lonely place. And it's easy to isolate yourself. But if you keep a healthy circle of folks around you that keep you accountable and full of love and things of that nature, you'll be all right. So those are some things that I was very conscientious of as an undergrad, and I think those carried over well once I got to graduate school.
I certainly agree with what you just said. And I did not talk to my professors a lot in undergrad because I was not planning to go to graduate school. But I would say that I probably spoke with them 10% of the time and spoke with my peers the other 90%. And in graduate school, it probably flipped, and I needed to talk to professors about 70% of the time and to my peers about 30% of the time. Learning how to work in groups and have study groups in undergraduate was was a good preparation so that I didn't have to learn how to do that in graduate school. I was already prepared. I was already used to studying in that way, studying with a group of people. And I would say that you want to ask questions when you get to the graduate school and understand what they do to help you establish a circle. One of the things NC State did is every person who entered that year as like a freshman graduate student sat in the same room. So our desks were in the same room, and we automatically got to know the 25 people that were entering into graduate school that year. So that established that helped us establish our relationships.
That's wonderful.
It's just standing here, so I'll take it, I guess.
Hey, Andy, while we have a minute, let's talk about corn fungus, because I think it's
Sounds like something Danny had last week.
Oh, really?
You going?
Sure.
Yeah, we'll let you go, and then
It's not going to be about corn fungus, though.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll let the experts in fungus handle that. And then after you, before we move on to the next question, I would like to respectfully ask that at least one of our CoCor alums answer that from your perspective in terms of preparing for graduate school in this context of this place.
I remember playing a tennis match with one of my best friends in college, and when we were done playing, we'd swap stories about who's doing what, and Travis was dead set on going to grad school, and I said, grad school doesn't matter, I'm not going to worry about that. But by the time, I think I indirectly followed the grad school path because of an internship that I took between my junior and senior year that allowed me to start full-time at the Federal Reserve and see what the work environment was like and prove myself, and that turned into a full-time offer by Thanksgiving. So I would highly encourage you to think about internships and make that happen, because my whole last semester of college, I knew my job was lined up and just to pass the last few classes. Once I got into the workforce and I realized that this tuition reimbursement program existed at the Fed, that's when I got more serious about going the grad school route. I always knew somewhere down the line I might want to be a professor. I had great relationships with my professors in my undergraduate experience and thought that could be a really cool job to have. So went full force into my MBA program, worked all day long full time, and did 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. 2 nights a week for 3 years straight to get my MBA, and then decided I was at that turning point where am I serious about this professor thing or not, and decided to jump in and do 4 more years. So I was 11 years of my 3 degrees combined, so it is a long haul, but really happy that I did it, and it's been well worth it. I wouldn't change it at all.
Okay, so I guess from the beginning of my undergraduate studies, I knew that I needed to go to graduate school because being a vocal performance major, I'm still a baby in the music field. So I need to get as much study one-on-one with professors, and just there's so much music out there. Like I just need that. So I had 2 great mentors while I was here at Coker, Dr. Hill LaRoche, who actually is at USC now, and then Dr. Jorgensen. They both helped me with my resume and plenty of things because I was in the honors college, which was a blessing in disguise, because I was able to add honors classes to regular classes like song literature. And so you need to have, I guess, to get into graduate school, but I was able to further that through looking at things that the other students didn't and get to study more. So that was a blessing because I know a lot more, I guess, about certain things than other students that I'm with at USC. And then they pushed me to go overseas to the FAVA vocal academy, so I was able to study composers that are unheard of in America, which is another cool thing, because I can bring different music to USC. And then, trying to think what else. What was the other part of that question?
Courses, experiences, things that helped you prepare or be
yeah.
prepared, whether you realized it or not at the time.
Yeah. And then just being in everything. I was on Spirit Squad. I worked at a dance studio. I taught music at a preschool, and I was in like every show I could get my hands on. So just doing all of that. And whenever I went and had my auditions at graduate school, they were like, "Wow, you did a lot." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Well, that's good because music takes up a lot of your time." So they really loved that time management skill that I had gotten from Hartsville and Coker. So, yeah.
Okay. So everybody doing all right? Good. So our next question is to get a little bit of feedback from you guys, offering sort of tips on selecting a program. So particularly, I think that has always been an important question, but except for the folks maybe who have selected a program very recently, some things have changed. Right now, in 2018, the moment you complete your first Google search, right, your Facebook and Instagram and every other social media feed you have will be filled with ads of programs telling you this is the right program for you. So whether you experienced it that way or another way, a little bit of advice on sort of getting through the noise and finding the place that's going to be the right place for you, that you're going to feel good about, and that you're going to have the best chance of finishing possible. And so a couple of folks who want to take the idea of how to go about selecting the program that's right for you. Sure.
Well, for me, I like someone that, especially when I'm looking for somebody as a new employee or something like that, I like to have someone who has multiple disciplines. You got guys like Andy, he just stays business all the way through, gets to PhD and all that. But I like to have multiple disciplines in there. Great example, our human resource director, she physical therapy major, and her master's is in human resource development. So it's all across the board because you bring kind of a different perspective into industry, and I'm speaking purely for industry. If you're going into academics, that's probably going to be the way to go. But I've sat in these same seats that you guys are sitting in tonight, and in fact, I think I walked on the same carpet looking at it, because it looks kind of bad. We're going to have to work on that. And that's a big jug of water she's got right there. That's like the biggest jug I've ever seen in my life. But, you've got to have something that separates you guys from the pack. And everybody has a 4-year degree now. So I encourage you to get a master's, because you got to have something that separates you from everybody else. So that's my 2 cents.
I have nothing to add to that.
Somebody on sort of also the concept of among the choices that you had, if you had various choices, how did you narrow it down? What were the factors that were important to you? How did you pick the one you went to? That's a good next step to that same question.
Okay, my first advice would be, number one, is find what you're passionate about and what degree you're actually seeking. There's a lot of variety out there, and there's a lot of different paths that you can take. And I know specifically when I was choosing the program I'm currently in, I knew that I wanted something in sport management or athletic administration, because I knew that athletics was a field that I wanted to continue my career in. When I was at Cleveland State, I had an opportunity to pursue a PhD in leadership, and I thought, well, I could do that. I could do leadership because I want to be in a leadership position, and that's something that I could use. But then I thought, that's not exactly what I want to do. And if I'm going to pour my time and my heart into getting this degree, I want it to be exactly what I want it to do. So I did a lot of researching, and the institution I'm with is actually the institution that Dr. Griffin went through to get her doctorate degree. And I submitted multiple requests to institutions kind of around the nation. I knew I needed something that I could do online because I didn't have the time to go to class all the time because of the career that I was in. And so there were a couple institutions that I reached out to and said, I'm interested in your program. And the institution I decided to go with, they were the ones that got back with me the quickest. They called me and said, what are you interested in? What do you want to do with this degree? Why do you want to pursue this? Let's get you started. And honestly, they called me the next day after I had requested information. By the end of our conversation, they had me send in my FAFSA. They had me send in my transcripts, and I was taking classes 3 weeks after that phone call. And it was just the kind of thing I felt, these people want me there. This is a place that I feel like I can be successful, and they're going to help me be successful. And it was a place that I felt comfortable with. And that's what you want to do, is when you're pursuing a post-undergrad degree, when you're going to grad school, you're getting your master's, you want to go to a place that has your best interest at heart and some place that you feel that you can be successful, because getting a graduate degree is different than your undergrad. Sometimes you're not in a classroom with, you know, your peers that you're with now, so you want to make sure that it's somewhere that you know you can be successful.
Okay, so things to look for. For me, I always knew I was going to go to A&M after my research experience. But I will say that you may want to go to the campus, explore. Undergraduate life is completely different from undergrad life. I went to undergrad at A&M and didn't feel like I understood undergrad life when I got into grad school. Two totally different worlds. Research the program in depth. So know the professors that are there and know their research interest. There's nothing like I'm reading through letters, and if I'm an expert in a certain area and you're interested in, and you don't know any of my work, for some professors that's an ego check. Like, you don't mention me, I'm the expert in this field. That's something you may run into, but the idea is you should be doing your homework on the program that you want to be in. So know what they're in, know what your intentions are, lay them out. Trying to think, what else would I look for? The field. So I know for me, I was interested in demography and race. So demography is the study of population change. So population only changes in death, births, and migration. So I knew A&M had a very strong program with race, class, gender, and also demography, and so that fit me. If you know a department is strong suited in something that's not your strong suit, that might not be the place for you. But what is important is that you research and know the faculties there, know their strong suits, and make your decisions based off that.
Anybody else? The next question I've heard answered with a couple of opinions already. The next question on the list is, would you advise working for a while or starting right away?
You definitely do not want to work for a while, I can promise you that. I realized getting my master's, it was about 4:30 in the morning, and I was designing a formula, and it had 25 parentheses in it. And I kept getting an error message in Excel, and I could not figure out the reason. So I went through this thing about 12 hours worth of going through it. And I had 25 parentheses on one side and 24 on the other. So I just miscounted. And that's when I realized I had been out of school way too long. So I came real close to, just saying the heck with it, but I stuck it out, and I cannot emphasize to you all to go ahead and do it. Do it now. Do it while you're young. Do it while you can get through it. And I would also advise, you're already familiar with this place, so if you have a master's degree program here that you would like to, try, do it here. I mean, you've got great professors already here. Well, I mean, you got some really good professors, and then you got Andy. But I mean, you can't have it all here. You know what I'm saying? But pick Coker. I mean, why not us? Pick Coker. I didn't have that option when I was here. They didn't offer master's degree programs. I probably couldn't get in anyway. But I I remember you in the tenure vote comes up. But anyhow, I would just recommend Coker. I mean, why not here?
We have to give the opposite.
Yeah, is there a counterpoint?
You
Yeah.
have to give the opposite advice also, which is, and that just makes it better for you guys to make a decision. But one of the things about going to work first and then going to graduate school is that it helps you put what you're studying in perspective. Because now you've already worked for a little while, and you understand why you may be studying something, or you may realize that, look, I'm gonna stay up until 2 o'clock now, but I know when I get to work, I will get off at 5 or 5:30. And that's the sort of motivation for you to go on and finish the program. So I think work can help me put it in perspective, and as Dr. Burkemper said, it also gives you a way to fund your graduate schooling also if you don't have that funding.
And I'll just ask you, how many of you think you can't have children while in graduate school? Do you think you can have children? Bree, you think no. The reality is you definitely can, okay? And unfortunately, throughout the years, there's been certain barriers put in place that certainly favor men. And those barriers are slowly but progressively being removed. And I'll have proof of this. I have a student, a Coker graduate, and her name's Megan, and she's finished her prelim exam for a PhD, which means she's a PhD candidate, so she'll get her PhD in probably less than a year's time. And she's had her second baby recently, and she's very happy, and her husband's also a Coker grad. And the reality is unfortunately, it's been kind of ingrained in our society that that you have to only work. And someone once said, recently in the political realm that women couldn't serve on a certain committee because it was a lot of work. And the reality is that's just a very 20th century and before attitude, and it shouldn't prevent you from pursuing graduate school. And even later in life, you can be a 40-year-old with 3 or 4 kids, and that that's certainly a huge amount of effort to come back to school. We have those students come back to earn bachelor's degrees all the time at Coker. And I'll say also, I'll echo Danny Johnson's sentiments with Coker's emerging graduate programming, and really nationally, online programming has made it possible for a lot of people to access higher education that could not otherwise do so because of jobs and family and other responsibilities. And that's helping level the playing field. And there are high quality graduate programs online, in person, that really weren't available 10 or 20 years ago. And my suggestion would be to seek out an accredited, fully accredited online, if it is online, or any graduate program, and maybe talk to recent graduates. I think that would be helpful for you, rather than just do purely online research and look at the advertisements. Unfortunately, there are less scrupulous agencies out there, and I'll clump all the for-profits in that category. I would stay away from those personally. But you may have had, I'm sure there's positive. I think even, I've had family members get positive results out of for-profit college experience before, extended family members. But I just would steer you in the way of a school like Coker or another school that is a accredited and not for-profit institution.
Okay, anyone else there? Yeah, go ahead.
Would you guys still go to grad school if you weren't going to make more money after?
In case you didn't hear the question, would you still have gone to graduate school even if you thought you weren't going to make more money afterward?
I'll take that question because in the sciences, you can make a lot more money with a master's degree than going on to do a PhD if your goal is to work in academia, mainly like at a college and teach students. So and even my colleagues at Research One universities, one of my close colleagues at Purdue, his wife has a master's degree, works for a company, and her Christmas bonus, they bought a new car. And he was like, working at Purdue as a professor, I would never get a Christmas bonus. And I certainly wouldn't be able to buy a new car with any bonus I would receive. And that's at a research intensive institution. So there's a big difference in jobs in private industry versus government and different. So you could certainly, so when I signed on, I did a master's first. I worked for 2 or 3 years between the master's and PhD. So when I went back to do the PhD, I had to reapply, and I went to a different school. I had to retake the GRE, which is kind of the equivalent, similar to SAT for college. It's the SAT for graduate school. And I was in my late 20s, and I felt like I was terribly old to retake a test like that. But I did it, and the reality is, going back, I knew that progressing towards a job like I have now, I would not be doing it for a better salary, because I would have been better off salary-wise to take a job at a master's level at a company and so forth. So it's mainly find what really makes you happy, and that's worth its weight. And you hear this all the time, but I can really tell you this from the bottom of my heart. If you find happiness in your job, and I think I even heard, I watched sports. Mark Jackson, former Indiana Pacer, said, if you find a job that you love, you never work another day in your life. And I'm sure lots of other people have said that before, but I just always remember him saying that. But the reality is it's true. It really is. So that's worth so much more. So I think there is reasons, financial reasons. Like if you graduate and you can't see that you can get gainful employment in the area that you're interested in, that's a good trigger for graduate school, because that'll make you more marketable, maybe more specialized to become employed. And certainly Sabrina can help you out with her role at Sunoco to give you what they look for in employees. So you can become more qualified with graduate degrees, certainly, and that will ultimately, in almost all instances, lead to higher salaries, even as public school teachers. There's tiered salaries. Graduate degrees increase your base salary. So yeah, but that shouldn't be the reason you do it. But it is a reason. I mean, it does. It certainly is more of the rule, I guess. You would get paid more with more credentials. Absolutely.
Anybody else want to take that one?
Kind of goes to what you said in the beginning, and what you just said, increasing your chances of being able to have the job that you want to have.
That's true.
I think that's a good way to put it. For me, it certainly changed choices. And I'm thinking about my dad, right? My dad, so I mentioned I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. Some of you guys have probably heard this before, but my dad worked in a paper mill. And so he retired at 57 because he made decent money, and he retired at 57 because he made enough money to retire at 57. But he retired at 57 because he hated going to work, right? He hated it, right? He worked for his whole 35 years. He worked swing shift, first shift for a week, second shift for a week, third shift for a week. And so I don't think, even when they were trying to, just like you, when they were trying to figure out what did it mean for me to go to graduate school, I don't think Dad was concerned about whether it would make me more money than him, but he was concerned, would it give me more choices than he had? Would it give me a chance, to have a job where I can stand around and talk about graduate school instead of putting on steel-toed boots and a hard hat like he did? And so I think that was the difference for me, probably instilled in me and pushed a little bit by my parents, even the parts they didn't understand. They felt like, if you're getting more choices and more opportunities than we had, then we want that for you. And then I was also, now I can see you're ready to say something, and I was thinking about, do you go right away or do you work a little bit? And heard different answers. And in my own home, you might have heard me mention, both of those happened, right? I went straight into graduate school. My wife worked for 6 years before she went back to get her MBA. And I think for both of us, in both cases, it was the right thing, right? Because I knew exactly where I wanted to go next. And I think Nicole would tell you it was a little bit later that she realized this was the next right path for me, right? That's not what she would have chosen at that first time. And it did mean some of those other things. Abigail, our oldest, and I spent every Monday night together from 6 to 10 because Mom was in class, right? And to be able to make that work. But I think in both cases, they're two different paths, but they were the right one for each of us at the time. Somebody else wanted to speak to her question?
I'll take it. Nice question, Kayla. So, going to grad school for more money. For me, I went to grad school out of intellectual curiosity. I'm stimulated by intelligent conversations, academic conversations. So for me, it wasn't more about the money, more so than I just wanted to challenge myself. Can I go and get the master's? My mother has a master's degree. She took, maybe 10 years off between the undergrad and grad, so she did it with 3 kids doing her master's. So one, I knew I was going straight through. I saw that in middle school. I'm like, man, you are grinding. You're a teacher in the day at a middle school. You're going to night school for your master's. So for me, I didn't have an excuse. And so I was like, and I'm gonna do better than her, so I'm gonna get the PhD because I'm your kid and I have to one-up you. So I didn't have a choice. And so getting the PhD wasn't about money. It was one, making sure that my mom knew that I could do one step above, but it was also about intellectual curiosity. I love to teach, so I always knew that I was going to be a teacher. My actual dream was to go right back to my high school and teach, like high school math or something like that. But things don't work out the way you think they do at 18. And so going to grad school for me wasn't like a grad for money, because with the skill sets that I got at A&M, I could have went and worked for the government. And from what I've seen, some of my colleagues could have been a nice salary, but they work desk jobs. They like it. They like the crunch numbers and stuff like that. But I enjoy interacting with students. So if you've had me in class, I'm animated. I love having conversations, trying to stimulate the minds and things of that nature. So for me, there's no amount of money that can amount to that, because it's a different type of value. It's intrinsic for me, and no amount of salary can help that. At least in my estimation. Now, of course, Verizon doesn't care about intrinsic value. They're like, where's my money?
Everybody good? Everybody still here?
I think it's all that intellectual thought. Let's go.
Yeah. That's not what they mean by drop the mic. So a good follow-up to that, follow-up to what he said, not whatever just happened to us, is there's another side to the money piece, right, which is how are you going to pay for it? Right? And so that's one of the questions on my list. A little bit of advice on, and some of that we've heard a little bit already, some people talking about how they made it work for them, but if anybody else wants to jump in on the ideas of, okay, how do you fund it? How do you make it work? Anybody want to speak to that?
Well, you just sort of do it like everything else, over time. Sometimes a very, very long time. But, that's kind of the thing. I mean, if it's something that's worthwhile, it usually takes a while to pay for it. I mean, that's just the way it goes. But, you had a good point a minute ago. Why would you do it? Would you do it, just for money? To answer your question, I didn't get a raise whenever I got my master's degree. My family, we have a family-owned company, and when I started here at Coker in 2000, we've been in business maybe 5 years, and we probably had, I started off as the only employee in 1995, and now we have hundreds of employees coast to coast from here to Washington State. So whenever I wanted to get my master's, I just wanted it so, a lot of what you were saying, I'm one of those people where if somebody else can do it, I feel like I can do it too. And, my dad, he gave me a hard time because he said, you're VP now, and the only way you move up is if I pass away. So, I mean, it's you're not going to get a promotion by getting a master's degree. But it was something I wanted to do. And, you look at people like Andy, I mean, if he can do it, anybody can do it. You know what I'm saying? I promise I'm going to go easy on you, Andy, I promise. But, that's just kind of my thing, is it's not always about money. And I think that was kind of your question, is it's not always about money, because with me, it wasn't. I'm not giving it to you.
Anybody else there? I certainly will say, and then I think it sounds like you've got something. I'll say from my own experience, and my experience is going through a sort of a more traditional path, right? And one thing that sometimes we'll note about a place like Coker is that if you take, pick your foreign language, if you take French 101 at Coker, you will take it from one of the professors at Coker, right? And you'll take it from somebody who's done that, right? If you go to somewhere like I went to graduate school, you will take that with a graduate assistant. Now, for you as the student, that may not be the best opportunity. For the graduate assistant, it's a great deal, right? And so that was sort of my opportunity to get a graduate assistantship and to get my tuition paid for in exchange for teaching classes. And then get a little bit of a stipend. I mean, it was a stipend that had me eating a lot of frozen chicken nuggets, but it was a stipend that allowed me to make it work until I got out. And so if you're on a traditional kind of graduate school path where you go off to a master's PhD program on site, that may be an option for you. In other cases, there are options such as employee reimbursement, and in some cases, like Mr. Johnson said, it's deciding that the investment is worth it. Go ahead, Dr. Burkemper.
I think just a practical recent example of that, when you get to that PhD level, that's what Joe was discussing is fairly common, that you're either in a graduate teaching assistantship or a research assistantship, where about 20 hours of your 40 hours, even though it's more like 60, 20 hours goes towards helping to teach classes or grade or help professors on research projects. And that was the deal that I had at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City. I had a $15,000 per year stipend, which was enough to get ramen noodles and help pay. I had our first child we had my first year of PhD, and our second child we had during my last year of PhD. So it is possible to have children during the program. It doesn't make it any easier, but that's just a recent example that your tuition likely will be covered if you're at that PhD level with a little bit of a salary to help you out throughout the year.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we'll take a couple here, but we'll try to make sure we wrap up in the next few minutes to get you on to your next thing. And this is a take on what would you do differently. And you can answer it that way, or you can think about if you were sitting in these seats and there were a question. Right.
Okay.
Maybe there's a question that I should have asked that I haven't asked, right? That's what I'm looking for. What if you were sitting in these seats do you wish the panel would have told you?
I wish that, okay, so I went in as a vocal performance major, and now I'm wanting to add on the teaching. I kind of wish, because I basically wasted this semester, I guess you would say, with vocal performance. I wish that I would have known from the beginning, I guess, which you can't really know, that I wanted to go into teaching, so I wish I would have explored that more, I guess, and taken, I guess, more classes in the education field here at Coker, and just broadened my horizons, because I was dead set on, I want to travel across the world, and be an opera singer, and now I'm just kind of like, I really want to teach. So I wish I would have done that, because now I'm going to be stuck in school probably an extra year. But I'm getting to do what I love and do what I really want to do in the school system. So I guess it's good both ways. But
Somebody else?
I'm trying
Okay, go ahead then.
Well, I think that in graduate school, for me, there was a while where I regretted not going back to get my MBA, because I went back and got my master's in chemical engineering, and then being out in the work world, I think I really would have appreciated having an MBA a little bit more. So, just kind of you can't look into the future. You can't know where you're going to end up, but talk to a lot of people, and talk to people who are in your field, and find out the different places that people have ended up. If there's a way for you to do that, just try to talk to people and see where they've ended up, and see which route you think you might end up taking, because that'll help you make decisions earlier on, like she was just saying.
And take time to foster relationships, just like you're doing right now. This is the most social time of your life, to interact with other people. Even if you think you're not that social, you're probably making very strong connections with other people. And I had what I considered my academic brothers and sisters, people I worked very closely in graduate school, and they're like blood relatives to me today. If I needed anything, they would drop, even if I haven't talked to them in a year or 2 or 3, I could count on them to drop anything for me. They've taken Coker students in their labs, and they've worked on projects with me, and they really do become a part of your what you consider as family, because you just spend so much time working with fellow students on your projects and things like that. So take the time and cherish those moments. That's what I would do differently. I work so much, even my wife will tell you, we knew each other for 4 years at Purdue before I had to, not even the courage. She would say I ignored her for 4 years, but the reality is we were working so hard. We crossed paths, she'd come in and borrow our microscope or whatever, and I just wouldn't even look up out of my lab notebook half the time. And to be honest with you, those I could have maybe sped that relationship along a little faster. So cherish those moments you have with your people that you're with and you're interacting with.
Okay, we're going to let you go in just a couple of seconds, but first, I'm hoping that a couple of you can tell me what I should have asked that I haven't. Faith is going to go first. Faith, what should I have asked that I haven't asked yet?
I'm personally curious about Coach Green. Did you like the GA route of being assistant coach? I did. I can talk loudly. I really did enjoy it. It was tough. I'm not gonna lie. It's tough because coaching, it's a lot of hours, and to be honest with you, it's a 7-day-a-week job. And so there are times where I may get up at 4:45, and I may not get home till 7 p.m. and I've still got to write a paper, or I've got to do discussion questions, and it's where you kind of have to decide, is this what I really want? Because a lot of times I didn't have, I would say, like a social life. And it's very similar to being a student athlete. You go to school, you go to practice, you come home, you're doing homework, you eat, sleep, and breathe what you're doing. And so the transition from a student athlete in undergrad to going to be a coach in graduate school, I wouldn't say was much different, other than the master's program is online, and if that's something that you're good with and you're successful at, then you'll be fine. But it's definitely challenging why you feel like you're working a full-time job and still going to school.
So being a student who is going to graduate from the field of science and having a Bachelor of Arts, am I at a disadvantage compared to other students who are graduating with a Bachelor of Science?
Okay, Ian's question relates to a distinguishment between Bachelors of Arts and Bachelors of Science. And at Coker, we do have some degrees that are Bachelors of Science. All of our adult degree program students are BS students, and our traditional day programs are Bachelor of Arts. And to quickly address that question, no, there's absolutely no. If there was, I would have been a proponent to change that early on. I wouldn't let anything get in the way of my students progressing to the next level. And certainly if I thought there was even a hair of a difference. In fact, sometimes the opposite. The traditional liberal arts colleges that have a very strong record of placing students into PhD programs are Bachelors of Arts. So it's kind of a holdover to the traditional liberal arts model. And Dr. Parkinson probably knows a lot more about the traditional model than I do, but the short answer is absolutely not. In fact, if anything, goes back to Danny Johnson's speaking earlier about having breadth, and having a Bachelor's of Arts shows you have breadth of knowledge because you've had a more robust general education program. So you've taken taken classes outside of the sciences, and you've taken much more than you would if you were a BS student who wouldn't have a very robust general education program.
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
After turning your application, how long did it take the schools to email you about the interview?
Okay. Right. Okay, the question is about turnaround time from application to interview. And I suspect the answer is going to be very different for very different people, but let's give it our best shot.
A few months, and I would contact, there should be a coordinator of graduate programs, and I would not hesitate to contact them or ask even a mentor of yours to reach out to follow up your application, because I think that it's a very reasonable question when to expect a decision, and certainly is what I would encourage you to contact a coordinator of the graduate program at the institution. But I would expect, similar to internships, when you apply for like a summer internship, you might apply in December, January, February, and hear back a few months later. It's similar for graduate programs. Anything to add to that? Sorry.
Anybody else want to add to that? I know we had a quicker turnaround, and I think sometimes it depends on the type of program. If you're in a program that's more of an annual kind of program, which it sounds like you're looking at, then I think that's right.
For me, at the master's level, it was about a month. I applied to 2 different programs. They were both about a month. At the PhD level, it was a December application deadline, and it took till April or May for them to, they get lots of applications. And so at the doctorate level, I saw that waiting period was a lot longer.
We got one over here. When should I start applying to graduate school if I'm graduating in May? the law school side, certainly going straight into a JD program is certainly a possibility. Sometimes a master's, usually in a field that you wouldn't guess, like that has a sort of a writing intensive kind of focus, can put you in an advantage. But certainly you can take a swing, and maybe take a swing at both, right? Take a swing at a couple of master's programs, take a swing at a couple of JD programs, and see where your best opportunity flies. But in these cases, I would say for the kind of program you're talking about, that the yesterday answer is about right. For some more professionally oriented programs, they're looking at people who are on a more of a cycle, and you may have a chance to do things a little bit later in the cycle. But for a more traditional academic program, I'd say, yeah, this fall.
Typically, if there's an August entry point, it's about December when everything has to be due. So there is a long lead up to that and those types of programs.
And we had another one?
So I have a dilemma, and I've had this dilemma for quite some time. So essentially, after I graduate, I really would like to have my own business. I've always wanted to have the idea of just owning something. So I've been wondering, so the graduate program in this university costs $20,000, right? So I've been wondering, isn't it better to save this $20,000, invest it in something, and just learn as I go, or is it just better for me to go and
Okay. Okay, so the question sounds like a variation on this question, right? If it costs, pick your number, right? Because you could pick some graduate programs like Keenan Flagler at Chapel Hill is about 75, or something in the 15 to 20 range. Is it better to take that money and invest it in something other than investing it in a graduate program?
I think you may know my answer since you've had me in several classes. If you're serious about starting a business, I highly encourage people to work in a company of that track that you're hoping to start on your own, even if it's for 3 months or 6 months. Let the owner of that business know you're there more than just to do the hour-by-hour stuff, that you want to learn behind the scenes, and that will help make you more successful. It's a cop-out, but the answer is it depends. So I will always say, if you get one extra level of education, that will always serve you well for the rest of your life. You know, in the short term, you're thinking you want to immediately launch in and do that, but a master's degree, if you're willing to do it, will certainly open up more opportunities for you as you go down the line. So we'll talk some more. I've got you in class, and
coming from a family where we own our own business, I can absolutely tell you one thing: there is no better investment that you will ever make than in yourself. I can tell you that right out the bat, bud. And I've been in business for a very, very long time. We've been very successful with it. But if you can make an investment in yourself, it will pay dividends that you could never imagine. So that's my take on it.
I'll let that serve as our closing comment, because I think that's very good. As you leave, I would encourage you to shake a hand or two. All of these folks are here after their regular workday, not because they necessarily want you to do exactly what they did, except that they found the right path for them and they want the same for you. And if you can find someone who can talk to you about that, who can guide you on that, and maybe even write you a letter later on, these are some connections to make. So I would encourage you to shake a hand on the way out and get to know a couple of folks that you don't already know. And thanks very much for being here.